What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're going to take a look at 5 players who could be decent value for our Game Week 17 squad. So if you enjoyed the video and you find it useful, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. So we're going to start off with Akanji. I think a lot of people are going to look to Man City players because not only do they have good single Game Week fixtures, so Leeds away, Everton at home and Wolves at home to come in the first 5 game weeks back after the break, they also have 2 double game weeks, so one in game week 20 and another in game week 23. And obviously, Man City are one of the best sides in the league. They're going to score a lot of goals, and they're probably going to keep a lot of clean sheets along the way as well. So if you're an active FPL manager, you're probably going to have Haaland, right? I'd say nearly everyone will have him. Then you can look to De Bruyne, Foden, probably Cancelo as well. But what if you want to double up on the Man City defence, or you just don't want to pay that premium for Cancelo? Now, I wouldn't completely discount looking at Edison, for example. I know he's quite expensive, but he is the easiest way into the clean sheets that Man City will get because he's absolutely nailed on. Outside of that, I'd probably look at Akanji or possibly Kyle Walker as well. Now, the reason that I've highlighted Akanji is he's only 0.2 million more than Kyle Walker, and he's started every single game since game week 8. Now, I've watched quite a few Man City games, so I know he's played a lot, but if I would have had to have guessed before I actually went and checked, I would have said he probably missed at least one of the games in the league, but that just hasn't happened. So if we go to the FPL page, he was available in game week 6, didn't start. But when he didn't feature at all. In game week 8, once he started there, he's literally started every single game and played 90 minutes each time, apart from that game against Leicester. Now, I'm not sitting here saying if you buy him for 5 million, he's going to start every single game for the next 6 to 8 game weeks, because this is Man City, this is Pep Guardiola that we're talking about. But that is quite encouraging, the amount of times he's played. And we do sometimes see that, you know, maybe it's a defender, maybe it's a midfielder. They get themselves into kind of Pep's good books and then they continue to play. We saw that, was it maybe a couple of seasons ago when Ruben Dias first burst on the scene for Man City? He was pretty much nailed, and it was usually Stones or Laporte that would rotate, and that sometimes changes with Pep, and right now it looks good for Akanji. So as long as he's fit and available after the break, he could be a really nice option, just acknowledging that he probably will miss maybe 1 or 2 games over the next, what, like 8 to 10 fixtures. But if he starts enough of them for 5 million, that could still be really good value. So when you're obviously building your squad, you do mostly want to have players that are going to play most games, right? You don't want to have that hassle of them being on the bench and then possibly coming on for a cameo and just getting you 1 point. But I do think it's encouraging the amount of minutes he's played. Obviously, the expected goals, conceded numbers and stuff like that, they're always good for Man City. And there's plenty of fixtures there where they could get a clean sheet, like Leeds away, Everton at home, Wolves at home. One of the fixtures in game week 20, one of the fixtures in game week 23. It's all possible. So while I still think that Cancelo is out and out the best defender for Man City, he obviously comes at a premium. So if you want to go for someone cheaper, it could be Akanji. Now, I should really quickly touch on Kyle Walker as well, because he is back fit now and he is slightly cheaper. Now, he's not played, apart from the kind of 40 minutes against Man United, he's not played any minutes since game week 8, but obviously that's because he's been injured, and he did start every game from game weeks 1 to 6. So he might be a slightly better option, but I don't know if I would say that he or Akanji are completely nailed anyway. So it just depends which one you prefer out of the 2, because right now on the FPL site at least, none of these City defenders are listed as having any knocks or being out or anything like that, so they have got quite a bit of choice, right? So if Cancelo plays right back and Walker does miss out, it could be Ake on the left, then 2 of Stones, Dias and Akanji at centre back. You know, if John Stones plays right back and Kyle Walker misses out, Cancelo would play left back. And again, there's only a couple of positions then in that centre back spot. You've got Ake, Laporte, Dias, Stones, Akanji. So there's a lot of competition, and I'm not saying this is not without any kind of risk, but for 5 million for a Man City defender, it may well be worth it. Do you prefer Kyle Walker? Let me know in the comments below. Now, I was careful at the start of the video to say that these 5 players could be great value. I wasn't necessarily guaranteeing it, but I do think the video is a good opportunity to discuss those players that you're not necessarily going to see in lots of drafts over the next week or so. And one of the players I wanted to talk about was Cucurella, who's only 5.1 million. and that is a pretty cheap way into the Chelsea defence. Now, whether or not we should be trying to get Chelsea defenders in general, I'll come on to that in a minute because it's a whole different conversation. But from a fixtures perspective, things do look pretty good, right? Their toughest single game week fixture is, of course, Liverpool away in game week 21. They do have a double game week in game week 19. That's Man City at home and Fulham away. Again, not the easiest, but to me, having a double game week for Chelsea is just a bonus because outside of that, Bournemouth at home, Forest away, Palace at home and Fulham at home, they are good fixtures for potential clean sheets, right? One of the concerns I have for Chelsea is when I looked at the expected goals conceded numbers per 90 minutes for this season so far, I think they're in the bottom 5 or 6, which is not ideal. Now, Graham Potter is obviously a good manager. We've seen that at Brighton. Chelsea have lots and lots of good players at their disposal as well. So there's nothing to say that they won't turn that around, become better defensively, more solid and start getting some clean sheets. But the numbers so far are not that encouraging. But I guess when you look at the fixtures and the players they do have, there is potential there for clean sheets. So maybe going for Chelsea defenders, at least in kind of the short to medium term, could be a good option. Then we have to look at the players that they have and whether or not Cucurella is a good option himself. So Chilwell is still flagged. Chelsea do have another friendly to play before the game week 17 deadline. So that's not necessarily going to tell us exactly who's going to line up because Graham Potter has rotated quite a bit. But if Chilwell's not in that squad, that doesn't look great. So when they play a back four, Cucurella could be fine. The problem is when they played a back five at times when Potter came in, sometimes Sterling lined up in that left wing back spot. Now, you don't need to tell me because someone always says this in the comments every single time. Sterling is not playing like a traditional left wing back in that role. I get it, but you're still taking up that position rather than Cucurella. And I've said this quite a bit, before the break, that at Brighton, when Potter and Cucurella were there, Cucurella didn't play left wing back that much. So if they're going to continue playing some games in a back five, he's then, or that we're then hoping if we own him that he plays in that left centre back spot instead. And obviously they've got players like Koulibaly that could play there as well. So I guess the issue is a little bit like with Akanji and Walker. Will Graham Potter rotate so much that it's just not worth going for these players whatsoever? And that could be a conclusion that you come to. I think that for 5.1 million, the fixtures they've got, it's not the worst punt. But if it is kind of Cucurella versus Walker or versus Akanji, you probably just go for the Man City boys because their defence has generally looked way more solid so far this season. One last thing on Potter, because he has rotated a lot since he came into that kind of Chelsea role, partly maybe because he's still trying to find his best 11 and seeing what works, partly because of the congestion as well. But he didn't rotate that much for Brighton at the start of this season. I know he has in the past, but he didn't necessarily do it this season before he left. So we might see that as he spends more and more time with the squad. Obviously, he's had some time for those that didn't go away for international duty to spend time with them and see, you know, how they're progressing, trying to get his ideas into play and stuff like that. And I guess my hope is that Cucurella will see more minutes, but it is not guaranteed. So while I think he could be good value, because he's only 5.1 million, Chelsea are a team that over the last few seasons have been good defensively, even if they haven't been so far this year, and they've got the fixtures. It's whether or not you're willing to take that risk on him. So it's a good price. There aren't a huge amount of other defenders in that Chelsea side that are guaranteed to play who are cheaper. It's like I said, is it worth taking the risk? And do you think Chelsea can improve defensively? Let me know what you think. Right, let's talk about Leon Bailey. And I'm not sitting here suggesting that he suddenly becomes part of your first 11. Like if you're playing a 3-4-3, for example, he's going to be that player that mostly sits on your bench. And if you're playing a 3-5-2, you just wouldn't include him as one of those 5 midfielders. The question is he a better option than Andreas Pereira? Now, to be fair, Andreas Pereira has been great so far this season. Leon Bailey is on 3.4 points per match. And I think Andreas Pereira beats that. Yeah, he's on 4.1. So he has been good. He got a penalty, obviously, when Mitrovic was off the pitch. He's already got 2 goals and 5 assists so far this season. And if you compare that to Leon Bailey, who, to be fair, hasn't had as many minutes, he's on 3 goals, 2 assists. So there is potential there. The key question is, will he now get more minutes and will Aston Villa perform better under Unai Emery than they did under Gerrard? And I think most people would agree that is probably likely to happen. So if he can keep his place, get some more minutes, and Emery can improve things, he could be a better option than Andreas Pereira. Now, I don't think you necessarily need to spend the next week or so really worrying about this decision. If you just want to stick to Andreas Pereira because he's been great so far this season, then do that. But the numbers are encouraging for Leon Bailey, like 0.21 expected goals per 90, 0.22 expected assists per 90. They are both better numbers than Andreas Pereira is outputting so far this season, and that ain't bad for 4.5 million. It is worth saying that if you're looking for a player that's going to be on the pitch for 80 to 90 minutes, that is more likely to be Andreas Pereira. So you can almost take that into account when you're looking at the per 90 numbers. But I think there's almost, I don't know, something like a little bit exciting about having Leon Bailey on the bench instead of Andreas Pereira. I don't think there's a huge amount in it. And obviously the two fixtures back after the break are not great. Liverpool at home and Spurs away. But he's probably going to be on your bench anyway, to be called upon when you need him, either for an injury or a suspension, or for when someone just doesn't play that you weren't expecting. So he's one of those players that I think we can all mostly agree he's got the potential to kind of smash that price point of 4.5 million. Remembering he did start the season at 5 million. It's just whether or not that will happen and how long it's going to take for Unai Emery to get Villa playing the way that he wants them to play. So I kind of like the look of him. I think he could be an option instead of Andreas Pereira, but I wouldn't spend too much thinking time on it up until that deadline of game week 17. So Nketiah is a player whose name I've seen pop up a few times in the comment section over the last couple of videos, mostly to ask why haven't you talked about him more, because to be fair, he could be excellent value for 6.5 million in an Arsenal side that we expect to score goals, and he would be leading the line. Now a lot of that is going to depend on how long Jesus is out for, and interestingly I was looking on the FPL page, Gabriel Jesus isn't even red flag, which I'm a little bit surprised about. So he's 25% chance of playing knee injury. I'm pretty sure he's had surgery on that, so I think he's definitely going to miss the period just after Christmas. Maybe FPL are waiting to red flag him until Arteta gives an actual timeline, but Nketiah should start. I'd be very surprised if they play someone else in that number 9 position. It could happen. For example, Smith Rowe is going to be back soon. I think he's still yellow flagged, but once he's back, he could play on the left. Martinelli could play in that number 9 spot. But Nketiah was, I mean, it's hard to know, right? Because you're just going by reports on Twitter and in the media and stuff like that. It was kind of reported that Nketiah wanted to leave because of the lack of minutes. So if Gabriel Jesus gets injured and he's not available and they still don't play Nketiah, that's not going to go down very well. So I do think he'll play. Whether or not the fixtures are good enough to warrant going for him is a different story, I guess. Like West Ham at home, Brighton away, Newcastle at home, Spurs away. They're not necessarily great, but Arsenal has obviously been brilliant. So there's every chance that they can score in those games. And for 6.5 million, it's not much of a risk whatsoever. Again, it comes back to that question of should you be filling a forward spot with someone like Nketiah when you can have Haaland. People are looking at Mitrovic. We're going to talk about Martial, Wilson, etc. There's only 3 forward spots, and you've obviously got Martinelli, who's also extremely good value, and Saka to consider as well, and maybe an Arsenal defender. So it's whether or not Nketiah fits in. A lot of people have mentioned that Mitrovic is on 4 yellow cards. So if he was to get one in game week 18, for example, he would miss one of those double game week fixtures in game week 19. So that is something to consider. So you could start with Nketiah and then move on later on if you wanted to. I just think, for me, there's every chance he does really well for that price in that Arsenal team. I mean, you could argue that Arsenal will be a worse team without Jesus because of the amount of work that he puts in, but I still think that is a good enough team to score goals. So there's every chance he'll be extremely good value. But then, like I say, a lot of us got on Martinelli when he was only 6 million. Even if you didn't, he's only 0.3 million more than Nketiah, and you could say he's more of a sure thing in that side. So I just don't know if it's warranted to go that different, where you could just have Martinelli in your midfield. If there's 4 or 5 other midfielders you want, and you do just want another Arsenal attacker, and Nketiah is the easiest way to get one in, then that could be an option. But I just think that Martinelli, Saka, and possibly a defender are slightly better options. So he's not been spoken about that much. He's only at 0.5% ownership. I've not seen him in a huge amount of drafts. Is Nketiah someone that you're looking to go for? So if you were looking for a forward around that 6.5 million price point, you did want to go a little bit different, then I probably would go for Martial over Nketiah, mostly because of the first 3 fixtures that Man United have straight after the break. So it's Nottingham Forest at home in game week 17, then Wolves away, and then Bournemouth at home. And there should be goals in that for Man United. I know they've not necessarily been on fire for all of this season, but they have looked better when Martial has played as that number 9. Now, obviously, that hasn't happened that often. I think he's only played in 5 games in in the league and only started 2 of them, that in itself is a problem because those 3 fixtures will come in quick succession. But if you're someone that's willing to take a risk, Martial is the kind of player that is worth taking a risk on. His own personal numbers are pretty healthy, 0.43 expected goals per 90, 0.35 expected assists. Again, that is on a small sample size, but they are still looking pretty decent. So I do like him as an option. I will say again, I think I mentioned this on another video I did recently, you've probably got to expect that his minutes are going to be managed for these 3 fixtures because the first game's on the 27th of December, then they play again on Saturday, then another match on Tuesday. He's not going to play 90 minutes in every single one of those games. I think there's every chance that he probably only plays 60 to 70, possibly in all of them, and he may even get benched in one of them as well. So it's definitely a risk. Right? I'm not saying he's a guaranteed points machine over those 3 fixtures, that he's guaranteed starts and guaranteed 90 minutes, because that is just not the case. But he should play a good part, and the fixtures are probably worth, like I said, taking that risk on. And I think they've got decent players around him as well. Obviously, Antony is going to be lining up on the right. Brazil went out from the World Cup early enough that he should be back straight after the break. Rashford, obviously in really good form as well. Sancho's not actually going to be around. He's going to be missing straight after the break. It's going to be interesting to see when he actually comes back. But there's Garnacho as well. Obviously, Fernandes will be back, Eriksen, etc. So I think things are looking pretty good for Man United. There's obviously this kind of gradual improvement under Ten Hag, and there's a long way to go. But it comes back to that point that they have just looked better when he plays as the number 9, rather than Ronaldo or rather than Rashford or someone like that. So things look pretty good for the first 3 game weeks back. It's just what are you going to do after that? So let me know what you think about Nketiah versus Martial, or should you just go safer with someone like, who knows, Solanke maybe, or even Mitrovic? Let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed that video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll be back again soon with another video.